I feel a change in the US presidential election campaign. I've hinted at it a few times on the show, but now I am confidently ready to say that I feel the momentum is strongly shifting in favor of Donald Trump. I'm not the only one who's noticed it. Americans all across the country have noticed it well, and that is why we are seeing a strong resurgence in Trump derangement syndrome. Following his successful return to Butler, Pennsylvania on Saturday with Elon Musk, we've noticed that Americans and media and celebrities are out in full force with their crazy and all the reasons why they hate the former president. Joining me today to discuss is True North columnist Sue-Ann Levy. I'm Rachel Parker, and you're watching Rachel and the Republic. Hey everyone, welcome back to Rachel and the Republic. I'm your host, Rachel Parker. So, we are doing a full episode on Trump derangement syndrome this week. I actually haven't covered that yet so far on this election cycle. It's something everyone kind of knows about. It's joked about online fairly frequently. I think it first emerged during the 2016 election cycle when Donald Trump ran for president for the first time. And I was chatting a little bit with Sue-Ann, who was like, "Oh, let's do an episode on Trump derangement syndrome." And she began to kind of sending me some examples. I found a few myself of the ridiculous things that people have been saying online the last few days. And I feel like it's really ramped up in the last maybe 10 days or so. I'm trying to put my finger on what exactly has caused this change. It's just that earlier in the election cycle, I was feeling like, oh, this is going to be a really close race. And I was actually feeling not only that it was going to be a close race, but I was honestly feeling a bit nervous as I was watching things unfold. And I was like, you know what? Americans, they're really falling for this. They're really falling for this Kamala Harris act. This woman has no plans. All she cares about is murdering little babies still in their mother's womb. But Americans really seem to be falling for this charade. And I was fairly stunned. And in the last 10 days, 2 weeks, I just noticed a shift. It probably started from the debate performance when eventually it turned out that that did not swing those undecided voters in favor of Kamala Harris. And it ramped up, I think, really with the Butler, Pennsylvania rally, which was such a strong show of strength and courage from Donald Trump that he was willing to go back to the exact place where he had literally been like millimeters from death a few weeks back. Elon Musk, one of the biggest names in the world, showed up to show his support for Donald Trump, ended up speaking on stage, talking about how this would be America's last election if the Republicans lost. It's interesting to hear Musk use that language because it's the type of language that we hear a lot from the left. Oh, Donald Trump, he's going to end democracy if he gets into office. We're never going to have another election ever again because he's not going to let people vote. And they try to twist Trump's words to make it sound like that what he said, or just to remove context from them, which is sort of what the media most often does. What media should do is provide relevant and necessary context so that you at home can understand the story best as possible. But they do the opposite. They take things out of context to make, Republicans and conservatives seem really weird and to seem, like they have untoward efforts or desires. What Elon Musk was actually referring to there is he was talking about how if Kamala Harris was president, she was going to let in so many illegal aliens because, their votes would be so washed down by all the illegal aliens that had let into the country. As we know, she is in huge favor. She's in huge support of her open border policies, of the Haitian migrants coming into the country. And all of that really threatens the foundation of America's democracy. Similarly, like we are seeing here in Canada, although with immigrants of different descent. So anyways, as I've said before, Sue-Ann Levy, True North columnist, she's here today to discuss. Sue-Ann, welcome to the show once again.
Thank you very much. Nice to be on.
So this is something that you have personally experienced with people that you know online. You have been, firsthand a victim of Trump derangement syndrome, which sounds funny. You're obviously not Donald Trump himself, but this has impacted you. Why don't you tell me a little bit about why this topic in particular was so near and dear to your heart this week?
Well, I was in Italy a couple of weeks ago, and I made the big mistake of it was actually somebody who was involved with a synagogue I grew up with in Hamilton, Ontario. She posted how wonderful Kamala was. She was going to save the world. And I made the mistake of going on. I was in Venice. I still remember doing it. how stupid am I? I went on and I said, I don't know how liberal Jews can vote for Kamala. They're not, she's not going to be supportive of Israel. And we've seen it because she didn't go to Netanyahu's speech to Congress. Anyway, I was attacked for 12 hours, Rachel. Like, I was called stupid, unethical, immoral, my intelligence. How could I don't have any intelligence. This subsequently, and then I was blocked by this woman who said that I had disrupted her dinner party. These people are all like crazy flakes. Then a couple of days ago, I did the same thing with another liberal Jew. And she said, I used to be intelligent. I am no longer intelligent. So this is
That's how you know that they've lost you. You said something I disagree with. You're no longer intelligent. I used to think you were, but now that you've challenged my own viewpoints and the status quo, you're dumb.
Exactly. I mean, you can't even present facts. I mean, I consider myself pretty well informed. I mean, I covered politics for over 20 years, and I say this to these people. Well, you once were informed. You're not informed anymore, I'm told. And they pull out every personal attack they can think of. And it's just crazy because they don't want to hear. They just want to put their hands up to their ears and pretend that the facts are not the facts, and that Kamala is some guardian angel is going to come down from the sky. Look, I'm going to tell you, I am not, I don't think Trump is pretty, but I said to myself a long time ago, a couple of weeks ago, that I think that with the world in such disarray and so much chaos, that he is going to be the kind of person who is going to make things better for us, our quality of life, global affairs. And all one has to do is look at his last 4 years, but voters have very short memories.
Yeah. Look at the last 4 years and then look at where we're at now
Yeah.
on the brink of, it seems, World War III, America
Mhm,
potentially getting dragged into a really ugly war in the Middle East. Don't
mhm.
think Americans want that. Don't think Americans are interested in it. I'm going to share a personal experience of my own of Trump derangement syndrome. As I mentioned to my viewers, I think last week on this show, I was in Florida for Hurricane Helene, ironically. I'd actually flown down to attend two of the Tucker Carlson events. He just sort of wrapped up his big tour in the States. And anyway, so I was in Florida for that, and I was walking around, and I kind of just ended up in a conversation with a gentleman. This was outside of the event, not related to the event. And we started talking about politics, and he was like, "Oh, I messaged. He found out I was from Canada. He's like, I messaged my friend over in Toronto, and I asked him, do you still have that spare bedroom for me? Because if Trump gets in, I'm gonna need it." And there was a time in my life when I would have just sort of like been like, "Oh, haha," like, I would have just sort of just laughed about it, or, said, "Oh yeah," like not even there was a time in my life where I wouldn't have engaged. And I've just at kind of the end of my rope with these people that are so ignorant, and especially with Donald Trump and just the ways that they've been lied to, especially in the comparison to Kamala Harris. Like, it's so obvious who the better choice is to me. I really just didn't have the patience. And so I just sort of looked at him and I said, "Yeah, you Americans, you're always saying you're going to move to Canada if the politician you don't like wins, and you never actually do." And he was really taken off guard. He was like, "Oh, he thought we were having a bit of a nice conversation." But at this point, I was frustrated. I was a bit deflated in how the conversation had turned. And then he starts talking about how much Canadians love Justin Trudeau. And I was like, Canadians don't love Justin Trudeau. Canadians hate Justin Trudeau. Canadians are desperate for a federal election so they can get rid of him. And he goes, "Well, like, you guys really used to like him a lot." And I was just like, "No, I never did. I never supported him. I never voted for him. I'll say it right here on this show. I never voted for him. I never will." And he was a bit taken back, and he was like, and I started telling him about how the prices in Canada have gone up even more so than they have in the States. The average price of a home, young people can't purchase homes. Average prices of a home being like $500,000 in a lot of parts of the country. Like, this is not feasible. This is not affordable. And he goes, "Yeah, the economy is really bad. That's why I'm voting for Kamala Harris." And
And
I say, so sorry, the person who's been the vice president, who's actually had the power to do something about it for the last 4 years, the potentially second most powerful person in the free world, you're voting for her because she didn't do anything for the last 4 years when she was able to do something. And he looks at me, not a hint of irony in his voice, not a hint of humor, and he says, "Well, Biden really kept her out of all that stuff. There are
Yeah.
people who genuinely believe this lie that they're being fed by the mainstream press in the States, that Kamala Harris had no influence in American policy in anything in the last 4 years.
Well, that's a total lie because she keeps talking about being the last person in the room. And if you watched a press conference with Biden a couple of days ago, he came in, I think he was really pissed off that she had taken credit for him, helping out people in the hurricane ravaged areas. Not very well, I might add. But he came in, first time he showed up at a press conference, and he just said, Kamala's been at my side the whole time. And you heard it from the horse's mouth. So and I have to believe, with respect to the Israel situation, she's cozied up to those awful people in the Democratic Party like Elon Omar and all those people who hate Jews. So, you know what? That's a pile of bunk. I knew they were really desperate when they started calling in Obama this week. And if you listen to her talk, it's like, I don't know if she's got the pearl earrings with the headpiece that they've been talking. Yeah. But if you hear her talk, it sounds like it's straight out of Obama's mouth. It's just incredible. Like, that woman cannot formulate a single sentence properly.
It's funny when you talk about the stuff with Biden kind of like continuously undermining, like even the fact that he had a mega hat, like he was photographed with a mega hat on and then he was seen carrying it. And everyone's kind of like, these pictures aren't edited. Like this actually happened. I think everyone's like, is he just so pissed that he got forced out and now he's trying to get it? Like it seems like that's definitely possible. My only hesitation on that thought is he still with it enough to even like be like upset that he was taken out to the point that he's now able to plan sort of this vengeance, this comeback. Like I'm not saying that he's not, I'm not sure, but I think there's some real possibility here for Biden to have a bit of like a redemption arc if he continues to undermine Kamala and to just say like, this woman, she's useless, she hasn't done anything, or maybe she has been involved in these bad decisions, but I don't know. There's something about what Biden's been doing in the last couple of weeks that I'm just like, I feel myself sort of softening towards him. It's all a bit humorous to watch unfold. And, even though I think he was a horrible person in his life and he was a horrible politician, in the policies that he passed and the way that it harmed the American people, it's hard to just hold, he's such an old, frail man. Like it's hard to just not watch things unfold and just to feel a little bit bad for him in the way that he himself has been used and manipulated. And really the way that he's been hung out to dry by his own wife, like the person who should really be the number one person who should be protecting you and caring for you and looking out for you. He's just been brutally used and manipulated by Dr. Jill. So that's all been very sad to unfold. Let's play a couple clips. We've pulled a couple clips of people and, their Trump derangement syndrome. The first one here, this is from Keith Olbermann. I talked to you guys a little bit about Elon Musk speaking at the Butler, Pennsylvania rally with Donald Trump. And that was so well received. It was such a powerful moment. I'm sure you guys have seen the imagery. Elon Musk walking behind stage on Trump and literally like jumps in the air with just sheer joy and happiness. Like it was very odd and wholesome and joyful all at the same time. And then he delivered this really powerful speech talking about how Donald Trump is someone who has really revealed himself to hold his convictions and to be courageous under pressure. And I don't think most of us know how we would react if we were shot at, not even to mention live on stage. I don't know how I'd react. Probably not very well. You at home, you probably wouldn't react very well. There's the occasional odd person who might be able to really withstand that pressure and to hold their composure and act with grace and courage. But that's not really the average person. And obviously, Donald Trump did all those things. He got back on his feet. He pushed his way through his Secret Service agent so he could pump his fist in the air. Like most people would be like cowering in fear and desperate to get away and out of that environment. And so, Elon Musk really talked about how Trump is someone who showed how he can handle the pressure. Meanwhile, Biden is falling down the stairs. So that was really well received. I think it was a really powerful moment. We talk about the momentum building for the Republicans. Like that was a huge moment that contributed to that onslaught of momentum. Like JD Vance, another thing, like that vice presidential debate performance was so strong. So this is why I'm looking at the campaign and I'm saying, I'm really seeing that initially I thought maybe Americans were buying into the Kamala Harris lie and the Kamala Harris narrative. And I think more and more people are rejecting it. because their lives are so difficult, things are so unaffordable. They're afraid to go out into the streets of their own cities in some cases, and they're also afraid of the threat of war that looms. And so, meanwhile, we've had a lot of really big moments with the Republicans. I think momentum is building for that campaign. And now I think we're seeing the left really become desperate, and that's when they become the most crazy, and it can be in many cases the most entertaining to watch. So if you guys are checked out of the American election cycle, this is probably the best time to really check back in and start paying attention, because you're going to see some really hilarious and humorous and maybe potentially historical moments happen next coming week. So here's Keith Olbermann reacting to Elon Musk's speech at the Trump campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. Take a look.
Time to cancel all the contracts and reassess his immigration status and hopefully deport him the hell out of the country. And if we can't do that by conventional means, President Biden, you have presidential immunity. Get Elon Musk the F out of our country and do it now.
So let's get rid of the person who's creating thousands of jobs, who's really reinventing the future of electric vehicles, who's really reinventing the future of space travel potentially, who's really made it so that here in Canada, in rural America, we can have amazing and affordable internet access. I literally interviewed Todd Lowen in rural Alberta this week, and he interviewed me from his truck in rural Alberta because he had Starlink on his truck. Like, how amazing and impressive that, like, Elon Musk, I'm such a big Elon Musk fan. I've even considered that I am like slightly attracted to the idea of owning a cyber truck, which I know is very controversial. Some people think it's ugly. I saw a bunch of them when I was in Florida, and I was like, honestly, I like it. Like, I could definitely see myself right. It's actually like a cool looking vehicle. Like, my mom hated it. She thought it was so ugly. I don't know. I'm just saying Cybertruck might be in my future. I'm not sure about the electric vehicle battery. I think that's my one area of concern. But it's just so, like, we're going to go after Elon Musk, like someone who's actually creating jobs and opportunity in the American economy, which is so desperate for that right now. It's almost too much to handle. You just can't take these people seriously. What's your take, Sue-Ann?
Don't forget that Elon Musk was the one who sent in all those Starlink equipment to North Carolina so that they could get, Donald Trump asked him, and within hours it was there, not even hours. And so that North Carolina, the people who are stuck still in the mountains and whose homes have either gone away or, blown away or whatever, have internet access. They can reach people. I mean, it's a pretty scary situation. And I think, people like Keith Olbermann are very upset with the fact that Trump was on the scene when the hurricane happened right away in Georgia, and then went to North Carolina. And it took Kamala several days. And of course, Biden, the one you feel sorry for. And you know what? He does have Alzheimer's. It's obvious, because I had a father with Alzheimer's. He was at the beach house all weekend when North Carolina was blowing away. So it's, Keith Olbermann is upset because people are starting to realize they're not being manipulated, as you say, that the Republicans care about people. And, Rachel, when I see them comment, when I see Kamala talk, and I see others in the media call him a threat to democracy and this and that, I'm thinking, like, the world is upside down. It's topsy-turvy. They engage in so much projection. It's unreal.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about Trump's response to North Carolina. I feel like Trump has always been very strong on responses to, whether it's devastating natural storms, or, in cases of the military, when there's been a death in the military, he often he will call the family or make an effort to call. In some cases they might not want that, but often he'll make an effort to call. And this is often even kept very private. Like, if you look, you can find stories of widows saying, or moms who've lost their son saying, "Oh, Trump called me." But that's not usually highly reported on. And I don't think it's usually advertised a ton, which is obviously quite appropriate in the case of a death. But he's usually quick on the scene in those cases. And like, anytime you talk to Americans, sometimes at his rallies, I'll just go talk to people. Why are you here? It's amazing sometimes the personal stories I hear of someone who will say, this is the way that, Donald Trump impacted my family. A lot of times it's much more personal than I would have expected. It's not like, oh, well, he did good things for the economy. It's, oh, well, this happened in my family and Trump called me to talk about it. I'm like, wait, what? Like, that's so crazy. Yeah. Like, this is someone who actually genuinely loves and cares for the American people. So when we're talking about Hurricane Helene, I mean, it's just devastating now that we have hurricane, I believe it's Hurricane Milton coming. It's also going to be running through the Tampa area. It'll be going from west to east. So it'll be going from Tampa and then sort of across the Florida, the little kind of, if Florida's a little key, they'll be going across to Jacksonville. But there is going to be a lot of devastation in some of the same areas. So obviously a very difficult circumstance. Now, we're talking about Biden, and I'm saying to you, you know, I feel that I've sort of softened towards Biden. And you're like, well, you know, makes sense because it's so clear to anyone watching that he's just not really there mentally. He has Alzheimer's. Some people think he has dementia. You know, he has a degenerative disease, and it's very sad watching him. I think that the American people are picking up on that too. You know, he doesn't remember where he is. He doesn't remember what he's talking about. I think any normal person watching it doesn't even necessarily feel as much anger towards him anymore, as it's just really sad to watch. But then it would only be natural that they would put the responsibility on Kamala Harris, for example, to respond in cases like Hurricane Helene. And so I think Hurricane Helene has been so devastating for the Democrats and for the Biden-Harris administration. And now, with them basically saying they're out of money for Americans because they've spent on asylum seekers $750. I know you have more to say about this, Sue-Ann, but they told survivors and victims of Hurricane Helene that they would be eligible for $750. That's it. That's it. And you're not even getting the money in some cases.
It's disgrace. It's a disgrace. And I've heard some people, well, they have to apply for it. And I don't know if you heard the latest that FEMA was meeting, and they were saying that they were going to help LGBTQIA people first because they were, you know, they're obviously oppressed more than the rest of, you know, the residents of North Carolina or wherever. I mean, this organization is just so bureaucratic, so much red tape, and no one's really in charge. But yeah, they've given the money to illegals, to the immigrants coming in. And in fact, Kamala denied it. And there's tape that was pulled out from 2020, I believe, where she said they were going to give, oh no, it was Karine Jean-Pierre. That's the White House spokeswoman who walked out on the CNN, and not the CNN, the Fox News reporter yesterday because he was pressing her, you know, giving her hard questions on this. But I mean, it's outrageous that they spent money on illegal immigrants and didn't keep it for these kinds of situations. America first. And this is what's going to resonate with people around the United States as, you know, Trump talks about America first. You're paying high taxes and you're giving money to people who are illegally crossing the border. I mean, something's really wrong with that picture.
So while you're talking about this topic of America first, some people, some crazy people on TikTok might call it American selfishness. Let's take a look at this next TikTok that we found. Here's another example of Trump Derangement Syndrome. Take a look at this.
Who else is still shocked that Donald Trump has a chance at getting into the White House? I'm disheartened. I'd like to think I understand America at least a little, but when you see just how he treats people around him, and when you see how he manipulates the media, and when you see how disrespectful he is to women and how little he cares about the common person, how much for himself and how little for everyone else, is America really this selfish? Is that us culturally? Is America a selfish asshole? Maybe.
So I'm going to ignore all the rather obviously false attacks she made against Trump. Let's just put that all to the side for a minute. You guys can unpack that for yourselves at home. And let's talk about how she calls America selfish. We have this exact same problem here in Canada. The issue is not that our governments are selfish or that our people are selfish. It's actually that we don't think about ourselves enough. Canadians don't put Canadians first enough. The Canadian government doesn't put Canadians first enough. The same situation is happening in the States. It's so out of control in America, like in Canada, that we've now gotten to a point where a devastating hurricane comes through and decimates entire towns and villages, washes people's home away, that the government looks at American people who have spent their entire life paying into a system, paying taxes, and it looks at them and they say, we can give you $750. That's enough to cover the damage, right? Because all of the money has gone to asylum seekers who are not American citizens, who have not spent their entire life working and paying into a system that should be there for them the one time they actually need it. That's, in fact, how not selfish the American government is. And it's a really big problem. It's a really big problem in America, and it's a really big problem in Canada.
Exactly. And this is what people should be looking at when they choose to cast their vote. How they behave in crises. I saw footage of Kamala, allegedly Trump is selfish, blah, blah, blah. I saw footage of Kamala turning up like she had to, reluctantly, and handing out bags. And this Black woman was speaking to her about how her life has been turned upside down. And she couldn't look more bored, more disinterested. It's not just the word salads she emotes, but it's the body language, her body language. And, it's the problem is that you've got these people that we've posted, and that woman that we just posted is like the every Democrat who's just like low information voter, doesn't have any insight. But the media has manipulated them, and people are not using their own brains to think about. And then you've got people like The View, and I know you've got a clip from The View, who had Kamala on today, and the misinformation and the fawning over her, and it's just the media. I thought the media in Canada was biased, but boy, oh boy, the States, they actually are activists. They're actually they should be signing up as activists. They should not consider themselves journalists.
Yeah, the American press is truly something to behold. I have to say, I tend to side with you on that. Like, the Canadian media is so bad, and then you go into the States and you're like, oh, they are not even trying to hide it here. Like, it's somehow so much worse, which is like kind of a stunning thing to say because it's already pretty bad here in Canada. Right. Talking about The View, they did a whole segment really praising Liz Cheney for giving an endorsement of Kamala Harris. We're talking about Trump Derangement Syndrome. We see it from the average American voter who watches too much CBS. We see it from Democrats. We see it from the media. We see it from American commentators. We also see it from some so-called Republicans who I think are holding on to the bygone era of the Republican Party that, Republican voters are not interested in anymore. And like, when we talk about Trump, he's such a change, and that was really hard for people to grasp in 2016. And some people like Liz Cheney just haven't been able to accept that this is a direction the party has chosen for this moment in America right now. Here she is giving her endorsement of Kamala Harris. Take a look.
Never voted for a Democrat, but this year I am proudly casting my vote for Vice President Kamala Harris.
So I guess when I see a clip like this, what I wonder is what the impact is and whether it matters. Initially, I think my initial reaction to this type of thing is, probably won't sway many people. But when we look at the vice versa, when we look at prominent Democrats giving their support for Trump, I think a lot of people I've spoken to have said, I think this actually does matter. And I have seen a little bit of commentary online of people saying, I will be voting for Donald Trump because I started paying attention and reading into it more and doing my own research after he received an endorsement from people like
Tulsi
Gabbard. Yeah, thank you. The name was slipping my mind. And so vice versa, I wonder if this is happening in Republican circles where they're like, I would never vote for Kamala Harris. And they're like, oh, well, Liz Cheney is endorsing her. Does this have any impact?
I think that if people, I'm very disappointed with the intellect of some Americans, but I think if people really thought about it, a lot of the people who've pulled away from Trump are insiders who know that their days are numbered. They know that under a Trump presidency, they're not going to do very well. Same with the media. They know that they're going to be sidelined under a Trump presidency. And I just laugh because too bad. Your agenda, you never covered anything objectively. Too bad for you. I think that I really hope and feel that there are a lot of lean-in voters who don't want to say in polls that they're voting for Trump because of the Trump derangement syndrome. I mean, I think I told you before we got on the air that there are people in country clubs in Florida that won't talk to each other because one is Democrat, one is Republican, and never the twain shall meet. I know a friend of mine, she can't talk to her friends about Trump. I mean, it's crazy. But,
I think it's really the case that politics has become the new religion. People care about political values more than they tend to care about religious beliefs, if they even hold any at all.
Right.
And if you don't believe that, I mean, you need to look no further back than COVID, which was really political, if nothing else, and to see how people treated each other if they weren't vaccinated or different masks, and the way that that divided some families, in some cases irreparably. There are still people who lost essentially their family because of COVID, and that is a very crazy thing to say, but it is true. With the Liz Cheney endorsement of Kamala Harris, I think my sort of lingering thoughts on it are that you have to take it by a case basis. Is Liz Cheney someone who actually has a following? Are there many people who really care about what she has to say and are watching her closely and saying, she raised this point, I'm going to give it more thought? Or is she sort of like a nobody who's clinging on to the last little bit of popularity due to her family name? In the case of Tulsi Gabbard, she actually ran for the nomination, for the Democrat presidential nomination against Kamala Harris. So she still has some relevancy. And I think that she's been working hard. She does a lot of media. She had that appearance on the Tucker Carlson tour this year. So she still has quite a big following. I think she's very relevant right now. I think she's incredibly smart and interesting to listen to. She's so articulate. And she put out an endorsement of Donald Trump that was just really something to behold, talking about how the American bureaucracy is now going after people who they disagree with politically. And obviously the American bureaucracy has been doing that for years, but she painted a very clear picture of exactly how that's working. Likewise, the other name that was slipping my mind earlier is RFK Jr. He's someone who has a lot of prominence in Democrat circles and just a lot of popularity in America. Yes, partly because of his last name, but also he's someone who used his last name to sort of launch himself into relevancy. And he doesn't just cling to his famous last name as his only source of relevancy. He's actually very interesting, and he cares so much about health. And he talks about really the problems with the American food supply system and all the ways that the food is processed to create really an unhealthy society. And that's something that's very near and dear to his heart, which ultimately led to him endorsing Trump. So these two individuals specifically, I think they do have relevancy and popularity, and I think they do have big followings. I just don't know that it's really the same comparison. We talk about Liz Cheney. I don't know if there's that many people who are following her and are interested in what she has to say. Some, I'm sure. I just don't know that it would be enough to really move the needle.
I don't think so. I'm just going to tell you a really quick anecdote about RFK Jr. We're on the train, same trip to Italy, and my poor wife got stuck with a bunch of Trump derangement syndrome types. And they're talking about how awful he is. And my wife starts saying, well, how can you not like RFK Jr.? He's pushing healthy eating. And we saw that in Italy, how unprocessed food really affects your, in a good way, your health, contrary to North America. And, she was very nice about it. She said I was a journalist and that she had learned a lot. We get off the train, and in the terminal, these ladies are behind us. I don't know if they realize, and they're bad-mouthing her. They're saying, did you hear what she had to say? Did you hear what she had to say? I mean, she was talking about healthy eating.
Yeah. In those types of instances, the best thing to do is just before you're ready to walk away, tap them on the shoulder, have a nice day. And then they'll be like, oh my goodness, that's so embarrassing. Yeah. All right, everyone. That's all we have time for today on Rachel and the Republic. My challenge to all of you is post your favorite examples of Trump derangement syndrome in the comment section below. Sue-Ann and I will take a sift through them just for a good laugh. As I mentioned, I think the campaign is going to be getting very spicy. Definitely cue in now if you haven't been already to pay attention. I'm sure there's going to be some hilarious and legendary and epic moments in the days and weeks to come. And we will be sure to bring them all to you on Rachel and the Republic. Have a great week and God bless.